Adjoa was the crown jewel of the Mensah family. Raised in the lap of luxury as the only daughter of one of the wealthiest families in Accra, she lived in a sprawling penthouse that boasted panoramic views of the city. Her father, Mr. Mensah, was a respected business tycoon, and her mother, Mrs. Mensah, was a former beauty queen known for hosting the finest social gatherings. Surrounded by house staff that catered to her every whim, Adjoa had never learned the value of hard work. Her brothers were groomed to take over the family empire, but Adjoa was expected to marry well, remain beautiful, and maintain the family's pristine reputation. With maids, drivers, and cooks tending to her every need, Adjoa had no responsibilities, and she liked it that way. But life took an unexpected turn when she met Kwame, a self-made millionaire from a modest background. Unlike Adjoa, Kwame had clawed his way to the top. They met at a glamorous charity gala, where Adjoa's beauty captivated him instantly. He was confident, intelligent, and successful, everything Adjoa could have hoped for in a partner. They married in a lavish wedding that was the talk of Accra, sparing no expense. But beneath the glitz and glamour, their worlds were about to collide. The honeymoon was over. Soon after their wedding, Kwame began to realize that Adjoa was entirely dependent on the household staff. She spent her days shopping in the city's upscale markets, scrolling through her phone, or having brunch with her friends. Meanwhile, Kwame, used to a life of self-sufficiency, worked long hours and came home expecting to find some semblance of normalcy. But there was none. Adjoa didn't cook, clean, or even know how to manage their home. The tension grew. Kwame would come home to a spotless penthouse, cleaned by staff, with meals cooked by their professional chef, Akua, but something was missing. He wanted Adjoa to make an effort. He wanted a partner, not just a trophy wife. One evening, Kwame made a small request. "Adjoa, can you warm up the stew I made last night? I'll be home late tomorrow, and I'd love to have it for dinner." Adjoa agreed, barely paying attention. But the next day, she completely forgot. She spent the afternoon shopping and lounging, and it wasn't until an hour before Kwame was due home that she remembered the soup. Panicked, she rushed to the kitchen, only to find the soup had spoiled. Desperate to salvage the situation, she grabbed honey and sugar from the pantry and poured them into the pot, hoping the sweetness would mask the bitterness. When Kwame arrived, the first thing he noticed was the strange, sweet smell in the air. His stomach churned. He walked into the kitchen, and there stood Adjoa, nervously stirring the pot. "What is that smell?" Kwame asked, lifting the lid. The stew was a syrupy mess. He looked at Adjoa in disbelief. "What did you do?" I thought I could fix it," Adjoa stammered. "I added honey and sugar to balance it out." Kwame's frustration boiled over. "Honey and sugar? Adjoa, this isn't some dessert. It's soup. I don't need you to fix everything, I just need you to try." Tears welled up in Adjoa's eyes. "I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'll make it right." The next day, Kofi, Adjoa's eldest brother, came to visit the penthouse. Sensing tension between Adjoa and Kwame, Kofi pulled Kwame aside during dinner. "You know, Adjoa isn't like us," Kofi said, his voice firm. "She wasn't raised to handle pressure. Be patient with her. You can't expect her to be like you overnight." Kwame, frustrated, responded. "I know she's capable of more. She can't keep relying on everyone around her. She needs to learn to stand on her own." Kofi, always protective of his sister, was skeptical. "She's not used to this, Kwame. Don't push her too hard. She's trying." But despite Kofi's warnings, Kwame believed Adjoa could rise to the challenge. However, their conversation left Adjoa feeling torn between her family's expectations and Kwame's. Determined to prove her worth, Adjoa vowed to learn how to cook. She started sneaking into the kitchen late at night, watching YouTube tutorials, burning dishes, and practicing in secret. But as she struggled with her newfound responsibilities, she couldn't help but notice the growing closeness between Kwame and Akua, the family's chef. Akua was in her mid-30s, with a calm demeanor and years of culinary expertise. Kwame frequently praised her cooking, often staying in the kitchen to chat while she prepared meals. And the more he complimented her, the more Adjoa seethed with jealousy. One evening, Adjoa entered the kitchen to find Kwame and Akua laughing together. Akua had just prepared his favorite dish, and he was beaming with approval. Adjoa's heart sank as she watched from the doorway. She wasn't just competing with a professional cook, she was competing for her husband's attention. "Do you like her?" she asked Kwame that night, her voice shaking. "Adjoa, don't be ridiculous. Akua is our cook." But Adjoa wasn't convinced. Jealousy festered as she felt sidelined in her own home. As Adjoa struggled with her role as Kwame's wife, her youngest brother, Ya, arrived at the penthouse one afternoon with friends. They expected to be pampered, asking for drinks and food, and lounging around while Adjoa worked on a new recipe she was determined to get right. "I'm not your maid, Ya," Adjoa snapped after Ya demanded she bring him a drink. Her frustration boiled over. Ya laughed, clearly amused. "Look at you, Adjoa. You're playing housewife now? What's next, are you going to start ironing Kwame's shirts?" His arrogance mirrored the old Adjoa. Her anger flared. "I've changed, Ya. Maybe you should try it sometime." Ya's taunts brought back memories of the life she had once cherished, one of ease, of never having to try. But now, her desire to prove herself outweighed her resentment of change. The pressure to change wasn't only coming from Kwame. One afternoon, while Adjoa was practicing a new recipe, her mother, Mrs. Mensah, stopped by for an impromptu visit. As she entered the kitchen, she raised an eyebrow at the sight of Adjoa chopping vegetables. "Darling, why are you doing this?" Mrs. Mensah asked, gliding into the kitchen and inspecting the ingredients on the counter. "You don't need to cook when you can hire the best. You're above this." Adjoa, wiping her hands on a towel, sighed. "Mom, Kwame believes in me. I need to prove that I can handle more than just sitting around. I want to try." Mrs. Mensah shook her head in disapproval. "You're my daughter, Adjoa. You're meant for a life of luxury. You're a queen, not a chef." But Adjoa's determination was unwavering. "I'm doing this for me, Mom. I need to know I can stand on my own." Adjoa's insecurities deepened. She was convinced that Akua was trying to steal Kwame's affections. And to make matters worse, she overheard Akua speaking softly to Kwame one afternoon while she was supposed to be upstairs. "You deserve someone who truly understands you," Akua said, her voice low. "Someone who knows how to take care of you." Adjoa's blood ran cold. That evening, after Akua had gone home, Adjoa exploded. "I heard what she said," she shouted, storming into the living room. "She thinks she's better for you than I am." Kwame, taken aback, tried to calm her down. "What are you talking about?" Akua. "She's trying to replace me. I won't let her." Adjoa, "That's absurd." "No, it's not. She's always here, cooking for you, talking to you, smiling at you, how could I not see it before?" Kwame shook his head, his patience running thin. "This is about you, Adjoa. Not Akua. You're jealous because you won't take responsibility for anything." Adjoa's heart shattered. The words stung, but she knew there was truth to them. She had to act. Kwame offered, "If it will make you feel better, I'll ask Akua to take some time off." Determined not to lose her husband, Adjoa took matters into her own hands. She redoubled her efforts to learn how to cook and run the household. She began practicing every day, perfecting her skills in the kitchen while managing the staff and taking charge of the penthouse. For the first time in her life, Adjoa was in control. It was Kwame's birthday, and Adjoa wanted to surprise him. She spent hours preparing his favorite dish, the same one Akua had made for him so many times before. But this time, it was all her doing. When Kwame arrived home that evening, he was shocked to find the table set for two. The air was filled with the mouth-watering aroma of perfectly cooked stew. Adjoa stood nervously by the stove, wiping her hands on a dishcloth. "You did this?" Kwame asked, disbelief in his voice. "I did," Adjoa replied, her heart pounding. Kwame sat down, took a bite, and his eyes widened. The stew was perfect. This is incredible, he said, looking up at Adjoa with a mixture of surprise and pride. Adjoa smiled, finally feeling like she had earned her place. Her father, Mr. Mensah, and her brothers, Kofi and Kojo, joined for the birthday dinner, and the pride in Mr. Mensah's eyes was unmistakable. You've done well, Adjoa, he said, a rare compliment from the usually stern businessman. Kojo added with a grin, told you had this all along. Even Kofi, who had been skeptical of Kwame's expectations, smiled approvingly. I underestimated you, he admitted, raising his glass in a toast to his sister. You've really grown. For the first time, Adjoa felt the weight of their approval and respect. She had stepped out of the shadow of her family's wealth and proved her capability. Kwame, too, looked at her with renewed admiration, seeing her not just as his wife but as his equal. But old habits die hard. One evening, Adjoa was hosting an upscale dinner for Kwame's business associates. It was an important night, and Adjoa had spent hours preparing. She had even enlisted the help of a private chef, just to ensure everything went smoothly. As the night unfolded, Adjoa found herself basking in compliments. The guests marveled at the luxurious decor, the impeccable food, and her poise as the hostess. For a moment, she felt like the young woman she once was, untouchable, admired, and perfect. But during the dinner, a familiar face showed up unexpectedly. It was Akua. She was a guest of one of Kwame's associates, now working for one of Kwame's rivals. Her entrance was unplanned, and when their eyes met across the room, the tension between them reignited. Adjoa's hands gripped the wineglass tightly as she watched Akua greet Kwame. The two exchanged polite smiles, but the moment was suffused with unspoken words. Akua glanced at Adjoa, a slight smirk on her lips as if to say, I'm still here. You haven't won. Adjoa felt a familiar surge of insecurity creeping in. For the rest of the evening, she couldn't help but notice Akua's presence, her confidence, and the way she still seemed to carry herself like she belonged. What is she doing here? Adjoa whispered to Kwame, her voice tight. Kwame glanced at Akua, his expression unreadable. She's just a guest tonight. Don't worry. But Adjoa couldn't help but notice how Akua carried herself, how she moved through the room like she still had power over the household. Throughout the evening, Akua exchanged polite pleasantries with Kwame, and though nothing inappropriate was said, Adjoa's jealousy and insecurity bubbled up. It didn't take long for Adjoa's suspicions to prove correct. Akua, now working closely with Kwame's business rival, had been feeding them inside information about Kwame's contracts. She used her knowledge from her time working in the Mensah household to sabotage Kwame's business. Leaking sensitive details about upcoming deals, Akua was determined to take down Kwame and reclaim her status as the woman who could run his life better than Adjoa ever could. When Kwame discovered the betrayal, he was furious. But more than that, he was hurt. He had trusted Akua as a member of their household, and her actions cut deeply. We trusted her, Kwame said, pacing their living room. She knew everything about us, our schedules, our plans. How could she do this? Adjoa, while hurt by Akua's actions, saw it as an opportunity. This wasn't just a business blow, it was personal. The woman she once saw as a rival had tried to dismantle everything they had built. But instead of crumbling under the weight of the revelation, Adjoa seized the moment. We're going to expose her, Adjoa said firmly, determination lighting her eyes. Kwame, initially unsure of how to proceed, trusted her judgment. Together, they devised a plan to not only expose Akua's betrayal but to take down the rival company that had conspired with her. Adjoa's connections in Accra's elite proved invaluable. Over the years, she had cultivated relationships with influential figures, politicians, business moguls, and media powerhouses. Now, she would use those connections like never before. During a meeting with one of her oldest family friends, a well-known investor with ties to the rival company, Adjoa let slip that Kwame was working on a lucrative new business deal that could shift the balance of power in the industry. It was bait, and she knew Akua would pass the information to her new employers. Akua will leak the information to the rival company, Adjoa explained to Kwame. And when they try to strike, we'll be ready. It was a dangerous gamble. If the plan failed, Kwame's business could suffer a massive loss. But Adjoa was confident. She had learned more than just cooking, she had learned how to maneuver in high-stakes business. Just as Adjoa had predicted, the information she accidentally leaked made its way to Akua. Within days, Kwame's rival attempted to undercut his deal. But they were walking right into Adjoa's trap. With the help of trusted journalists and business allies, Adjoa and Kwame exposed the rival company's underhanded tactics and Akua's role in the betrayal. The headlines broke, prominent business rival accused of corporate espionage, insider betrayal revealed. The media firestorm was immediate. Journalists swarmed the rival company's headquarters, and the scandal rocked the business world in Accra. Akua's role in the plot was laid bare for all to see. She had aligned herself with a company now crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. Akua had once thought she could outsmart Adjoa, but she had underestimated the strength and intelligence of the woman she once viewed as weak. Kwame's reputation was restored, and his rivals were left scrambling to salvage what little they could. Akua, once confident and respected, became a disgraced figure in Accra's elite circles. The woman who had walked through the halls of Kwame and Adjoa's penthouse with an air of superiority was now shunned, her name tarnished by betrayal. "I didn't know you had this in you," Kwame said to Adjoa, overwhelmed with pride. "You didn't just save me, you saved us." Adjoa, having orchestrated the entire takedown, smiled. "I wasn't going to let her take what we've built." In the aftermath of the scandal, Adjoa and Kwame stood together on the balcony of their penthouse, looking out over the city they had both fought to protect. The air was cool, and the lights of Accra twinkled like stars below them. Kwame pulled Adjoa into his arms. "You've grown so much, Adjoa. I'm proud of you." For the first time, Adjoa felt the weight of her transformation. She wasn't just the spoiled girl from a wealthy family anymore. She had proven her strength, her intelligence, and her resilience. She had stepped out of the shadow of her upbringing and into a new role as Kwame's partner, his equal. Like a rose that grew from concrete, she had blossomed, even in the harshest of conditions. Their love had been tested by betrayal, family expectations, and the weight of their shared ambitions. But in the end, they found that the greatest strength came from growing together, stronger and more unbreakable than ever before. As Adjoa and Kwame stood together on the balcony, gazing out at the dazzling lights of Accra, it seemed like their troubles were behind them. But was this truly the end of their struggles, or just the beginning of a new chapter? With Akua's betrayal exposed and their relationship stronger than ever, what new challenges will arise? Will their love continue to flourish in the face of the pressures of wealth, power, and the public eye? And could someone from Kwame's past, or perhaps from Adjoa's, return to test their loyalty once again? Stay tuned for part 2 of Behind the Glamour, Adjoa's journey through betrayal and motherhood, where new conflicts emerge, alliances shift, and Adjoa and Kwame face even greater trials. Will their bond continue to grow, or will the weight of new challenges threaten to tear them apart? Subscribe to African Tales with Kwaku and Akua to find out what happens next.